as I came out of school, I was kind of talking to all these successful people, and I was like, oh, like if you were my age, like I love real estate, just should I go into like real estate investing? What should I do? And almost like every single person at the MD level, so this is like 2015, they were like, Nia, get into tech, because at the pinnacle of your career, tech is going to be the single most important lever that exists for you to pull.
Welcome to VC Uncovered, the series where we highlight the next generation of investors who move faster, take bigger risks, and build shoulder to shoulder with founders. I'm your host, Drew Glover, co-founder of Fiat Growth and general partner at Cadet Ventures. Nia, thank you so much for joining the VC Uncovered podcast. Was such a huge fan of the issue that we did on the Uncovered newsletter, and I'm one of your biggest fans. We've known each other for years. You've been within the Fiat Growth, Fiat Ventures ecosystem, and I feel like we're always talking and going back and forth on different deals and different trends that we're seeing in fintech. But mainly what I lean on you for is like broad fintech, like healthcare, insurtech, these like edge case fintech use cases that I need to have a little bit extra, call it educational muscle on really deep research in other spaces. And you've always been like a really great pillar for me, as well as like the broader Fiat team. With that, again, really excited to dig in. And if you don't mind just kicking things off, telling us a little bit more about you, Montage Ventures, and what you guys are focused on today.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Huge fan of you and Fiat, and you guys are just crushing it with all of these events and everything. So super excited to be part of the community. Yeah, I'm a VP at Montage Ventures. We're a seed stage fund headquartered in Menlo Park. Core areas of focus for us are financial services, healthcare, commerce enablement. The way we think about that is, some of the biggest sectors that power the GDP, and really looking at some of the transformative technologies and the most compelling founders within those categories to really implement some form of global transformation. And yeah, currently deploying capital out of our third fund. It's 75 million. Average check size is 1 to 2 million, can lead, co-lead. And I would like to say that we're a pretty cool team. We like to say we're small but mighty, 6 investment professionals. And what I always love to tell founders is that the really cool thing about us is that we're all either kind of like serial founders, like our founder managing partner, Todd, and our GP, Matt, or operators with really meaningful operating experience. And that's our core value add. The way that we underwrite the deals that we look to invest in is really looking to understand what is the 1 or 2 things that we think we can do that meaningfully changes the trajectory of the company from our check to the next check. And, we try and be pretty structured with how we engage with our founders, whether that's helping them place talent, introducing them to investors for their subsequent round of financing, or just helping them really refine that go-to-market commercialization to raise that blowout Series A and, go to work alongside them. So we try and be the hardest working investors on the cap table.
I feel like a lot of VCs say hardest working investors on the cap table. I mean, obviously I've had a front row seat to a lot of the work that you do, and I can very confidently and honestly say that you guys do a ton of, I say, just like the extra sauce that's required for every order like that anyone makes. But I'd love for you to just expand a little bit more about like how that like extra, the extra that needs to be brought from a VC has evolved over time. Because back in the day, it used to just be money. Like, and now I think that cash is more of a commodity. We're finding a lot of founders looking for strategic VCs around the table, and it's not just about who can deliver money the quickest. And so how have you kind of like seen that evolution, and how at Montage have you guys tried to step up to that need?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that we love to say is, capital is just the cost of doing business these days. So when you think about partnership and when you think about bringing VCs on, just remember that every dollar you raise is a piece of the company that you're not going to get back. So a VC can either be, I like to say, a very expensive passenger, or a third, fourth co-founder for you. And the way that, we think about that internally is really threefold. So we tend to back a lot of really technical founders. And one of the areas that, they typically struggle with is really rounding out their team, hiring, recruiting. And this is something that, we kind of take on full force. We will screen a list of candidates for them, run the initial interviews, and then give them 5 top candidates that they can choose from. Saves them a ton of time, and they're super thankful for kind of our help in that area. And to that end, we've placed, I think, a VP or higher at most of our portcos, especially within Fund 3. The second area is having really strong thesis-led ideas within the organization that then allows us to push out content, white papers to our co-investor group. And where that becomes really impactful for our portfolio is that when we send a deal from our portfolio to our co-investor group, they're typically extremely happy to look at the things that we're doing because they're primed on our understanding. They have an informed point of view. And as a result, we actually have 100% follow-on financing rate from seed to Series A in Fund 3,
Wow.
which is, I think
That's
we're one
legit.
of the only funds that I know of that has that.
Yeah.
We're 17 for 17 in Fund 3, 94% across all 3 funds. And I think Todd and Matt in particular do a very good job of kind of building that connectivity with a broader ecosystem. And then the third piece kind of comes in tangent with that. I would say we're extremely strong at go-to-market commercialization, understanding kind of where the growth investor appetite is, what the PE funds are kind of looking at, and really helping our founders at the seed stage kind of bridge their story. And not that we're kind of mandating they need to hit this metric or they need to build towards that, but I think having a lens into what the broader ecosystem is looking for and then kind of having that in the back of your mind to like build along, it's really, really impactful when they go out and raise their Series A because they know the talking points, they know where the appetite is, and they tend to run like very clean processes.
Yeah. And I think you just did a really good job at articulating, what you need beyond capital, to be a really great investor. I do want to just take go a little bit deeper on this idea of being an expensive passenger as a VC. I think that's such a perfect way of explaining it, but maybe just for our listeners and for any, founders out there, folks looking to fundraise, can you give a little bit more of an explanation of like what that is kind of defined by, that expensive passenger that might be capital, but just might be extra weight with that capital?
Yeah, and I think in today's climate in particular, venture has become very transactional, right? If you rewind 20 years ago, it was all about the relationships, that like natural synergy you had between the founder and the investor, and whether that was some form of emotional support or being the sounding board, there was this kind of intangible value add that capital brought on. And I think somewhere along the way, we've started optimizing for just get the capital, build the company, hit the metrics. And as it relates to being a very expensive passenger, in today's world where you have so much access to knowledge, you have, pretty much a spreadsheet of all the potential investors that are out there, it's so important for founders to figure out who is the best investor for me from a culture fit, from a strategic value add standpoint, and how can I engage with them? How can I get in front of them? And really put that effort into not just run kind of like a blind process and get any kind of capital in and call it a day, but really do the work to understand who is going to have that kind of magnetic benefit to me, and like who can I call at 11 p.m. and be my sounding board. Because I think the one thing that holds true for me is that founders don't need more pressure. They have a ton of pressure. They need a sparring partner. They need a sounding board. They need someone who can help them find some perspective, help them understand when to sprint and when to breathe in their building cycles. And what I love about us at Montage is we all have such deep experience operating, and we can empathize so deeply with where a founder is at and what they're going through. And I think that's the really, really important piece to optimize for. So when I say expensive passenger, I mean, sure, you could raise a blowout round, but if that capital is not adding anything to you beyond the cap table, then I think the opportunity cost there is really high when you look at the landscape of who's out there and who you could potentially be working with.
Yeah, and of course I bring up expensive passenger, but I'm not finishing the quote that you so articulately said, which is they can either be an expensive passenger or a co-founder. And obviously, if you're looking for a co-founder, that is basically like finding someone you want to marry, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that goes into both sides of that relationship. An expensive passenger, anyone can get in your car, right? But do you want to be, if you're going to be in the car with someone for, 11-hour car ride, you want to make it so it's someone that you can really vibe with. So, yeah, I just think that's super articulate. I love that. Makes me want to jump to another kind of topic here, one that I want to pull from the actual newsletter. And this is really around the sergeant's mentality and in your time in the Royal Air Force. Because I think the mentality that you bring to venture and the mentality you bring to work, at least from what I've read, but also spoken to you, a lot of it derives from that mentality that was built in while you were in the Air Force that not only helps you do your work, but also helps you kind of breathe this life into the founders that you work with and being able to underwrite founders. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about what that background means to you and like how you brought it into this world of venture.
To clarify, this is a program called the Combined Cadet Force, where in the UK, there's kind of a select few schools that have formal contracts with the Ministry of Defense, and then you operate directly under kind of military insight, starting from the age of 12. So this is very, very young. And at 12, you're signing a contract with the Ministry of Defense that you will uphold yourself to certain expectations, certain decorum, certain discipline. And I feel very fortunate that I had that experience at such a young age. My school happened to have the largest contingent in the country. So that kind of military mindset was so deeply embedded in our culture. And I mean, you had to apply to get in and you had to kind of make your case for why you would be a good cadet. But I ultimately joined the RAF section. And I would say that it was 4 years and kind of moved up through the ranks from an NCO to a sergeant. But the most kind of formative and defining piece of my entire RAF experience was I was nominated for this gliding scholarship. So it's really prestigious. I was super, super excited about it. You go to an RAF base in Aylesbury, and the entire kind of mission is within 2 weeks, you're expected to get your solo wings for a glider. So the most that I had ever done was kind of like ridden in a glider with someone and that was it. But within 2 weeks, you're expected to kind of log an insane amount of dual hours with your flight officer. You kind of are up before the crack of dawn. You have really, really intense training. I mean, it's emotionally demanding. It's really physical. It's really just the sheer amount of exhaustion that I experienced at that time, like I can't even comprehend. Even to this point in my life, I think that was a very, very intense period for me. And, like everyone knows you're there. So there's this big pressure to kind of achieve your solo wings if you are selected for that. And within that 2 weeks, we also had 2 days of rain.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the time to get your kind of hours with your flight officer and meet all your milestones was really, really diminished. And I remember there was a point, it was 2 days before the end of the scholarship, and I was messing up on all the fundamentals. I couldn't even do a pre-flight check. I couldn't do a launch procedure. I was doing my ghost solo, which is basically you have to complete 2 perfect ghost solos, which means your flight officer is with you, but they don't say anything. They don't make any adjustments. And I couldn't even position my seat correctly. And this is the most defining piece, I think, of my entire life. He kind of looked at me and he said, PMA, positive mental attitude. That's your choice to make, and I can't do that for you. That's the only way through this. And I get chills when I think about that moment because something really aligned with me with that, and it just clicked. And I kind of had this killer mentality. I was like, what am I doing? I'm the youngest person here. This is my opportunity for the taking, and I'm going to do it. And I ultimately did it. And I got my solo wings. It's something that I'm so proud of because I know how difficult that period was for me. And I think what I love is how directly that translates to venture, right? Because I think what that taught me is optimism and positivity isn't naive. It's kind of a necessary mindset that you have to have. And I think that's what I love so much about venture is that's required, not blind positivity, but you need to have that optimism. You need to have that conviction. You need to understand that. And you need to be able to look at the upside when you meet a founder, when you see a market, and you need to be able to feel that lift before others can. And I think that particular mindset is one of the things that translated so strongly to what we do today, because I think people forget that, right? People try and be a little bit conservative. They're like, the data doesn't look good. No one's ever done it before. This isn't the phenotype of founder that will do this. And it's so important, I think, just going back to fundamentals, like venture is all about seeing the upside and being positive and having that informed conviction, I would say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, I was not a part of the RAF, but I grew up playing like really competitive American football, and I played all the way through college. And there is some like military energy when
Yeah,
it
for
comes to
sure.
football. I'll put it that way. And I do remember when I was really young, I must have been 11 or 12, and I hated football so much at the time. Like I used to like get so nervous going to practice. And there was a play I remember mentally in my brain. I was like, I'm going to get hurt on this play. I just need to get out of practice. And I did the play. I like faked an injury. I made a big scene of it. And these coaches pulled me aside after they told me like, don't cry, which I don't know if that was it. They did
Yeah,
say
no.
to me, they said, I have a very simple question for you. Are you hurt or are you injured? And I knew exactly what they meant instantly. And I was like, I'm hurt. And they're like, then get up and go back in. But it's a question that I ask myself because I feel like as like in the workplace, that's probably not the best thing to ask someone. But I will just say it's something that I ask myself all the time. And I think about it even when I'm looking at founders of, are these the people that are going to make like moments that might hurt them into moments that are bigger than that, and they'll call it an injury, and they'll kind of walk away from things or give up on things earlier than not. But very similar to that moment that was it PMF? Is that what you called it?
PMA, positive mental
PMA.
attitude.
Yeah, I'm thinking product market fit, PMA. But 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 yeah, like that. I go back to that all the time in these moments where I'm like, this is tough, this is hard, or I'm looking at a founder, working with a founder, and them saying this is tough, this is hard, and being like, yo, like we got to ask ourselves these very simple questions that ground us in these really positive, impactful ways. So it's just very clear. I know exactly what I need to do to dig myself out of this hole. So I love that story, and also just love that generally as a mindset. I also feel like, just as you are this really incredible investor, kind of how you are underwriting things. It's all everything that happened in our past is ultimately what makes up our present. And you were also an operator before you became a
Yeah.
VC. And I'm the biggest believer. I come from the same ilk of having this operator edge coming into the VC side, not only helps you understand founders, but also brings this empathy to their entire journey. And so if you're comfortable with it, I'd love for you to start a little bit more about some of those operator roles that you had and how those have very much impacted how it's made you a better investor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a time in my life where you couldn't have paid me to leave the operating side. So I was a very, very early employee at Pierce Street. Brew Johnson was the founder CEO. And I credit that experience entirely to how I show up today, to be honest. I joined when I was 23. I grew up with that company. I learned so much from Brew. We worked so closely together, and I spent 6 years with them. And when I joined, I was very green, right? Like I was an analyst. I pretty much begged Brew to hire me. As I came out of school, I was kind of talking to all these successful people, and I was like, oh, like if you were my age, like I love real estate. Just should I go into like real estate investing? What should I do? And almost like every single person at the MD level. So this is like 2015. They were like, Nia, get into tech because at the pinnacle of your career, tech is going to be the single most important lever that exists for you to pull. And that was just the best advice. And that was kind of across the board. I spoke to
That's
like
smart.
5 or 6 people like in this coffee chats. We're like, give me advice. And so, yeah, I pretty much begged Brew to hire me. He had me interview with like 12 people on the team. He was like, I love Nia. I don't know what to do with her. She's so green. He eventually hired me as an analyst and, worked my way up, ultimately ended up running the entire underwriting team, and then had a couple other divisions kind of run under me, hired around 60 people for my team, and did 4 billion in transactions.
Wow.
We were doing the thing. We were in hyper growth. And I think one of the most important things that I learned from that experience is ownership mentality. Um, and I love this story because I think it's so important for founders to hear. But our founder did a really, really good job of, especially in the early days, instilling this deep sense of ownership mentality in everyone that he hired. No task was beneath anyone. And I think when you build a culture where people feel real agency, you unlock an entirely different commitment and creativity that no amount of management can ever give you. And it was a marketplace to invest in real estate backed debt. So what that meant is that a lot of the volume that we would do would be back-ended. So 80% of our monthly volume would be transacted in the last 5 business days. And as we scaled, that meant that I was getting into the office at 6 a.m. with my team of 60 people who were all getting into the office that early. And we were doing hundreds of loans, hundreds of millions of dollars in that 5 business days. And I would stay until like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. every last 5 business days of every month. And there was just something in the air. You would like look up around 7 a.m., like it would be quiet. All you would hear was typing. Everyone was locked in. There was this palpable sense of energy that everyone was so incredibly excited about what we were doing. We were fired up. Like Brew had this insane energy, like every Monday in all hands, like he kind of reviewed why what we're doing is so transformative, the potential that we had. And, it's like electricity, right? Like there was this constant sense of electricity that was palpable at any moment in time. And you didn't only care about your own task. You cared about like, oh, I have an idea for product that helps BD. Like, let me go talk to them. You just cared so much about the company as a whole. And now like how that translates to venture is, I think ownership mentality compounds faster than any amount of capital. And when I try and meet founders, that's what I'm really trying to get a sense of. I'm like, do I believe that you can instill that kind of passion and ownership mentality in everyone that you hire? And do I believe that the people around you are so bought into your mission that this is their baby and they're going to get emotional about it too, and they're going to treat it like their company? Or do I believe that like you're just doing this to be a founder and to have a company and you're bringing people on board? And I think underwriting for that at the early stages can be the difference between a generational company and one that's not.
I 100% agree. I also just love this depiction of like the culture that you were kind of painting during that time when you guys were doing, hundreds of loans in 5 days and everyone just locked in. I feel like that is I feel like culture in business is like really shifted, and it's become a lot more challenging to recreate moments like that.
Yeah.
I also think that like there's just a lot more distraction, there's a lot more things going on in the world. But how do you think about like the helping founders, helping these different companies that you guys are leaning into, and like helping them build culture like that? Are you investing in that, in the founder, with the hope and belief that outside of all the other things that they need to have as a founder, that they're also going to be able to create cultures like that? Or is that something that is really built over time? Back in the day, you could just set some rules, say this is the culture, work, work, work. That world has very much changed, very much in tech as well. I feel like it's
Yeah.
gloves are a little bit softer now. You don't have to agree with that. I'm saying that. But
Yeah.
I'm curious how you're approaching culture within your portfolio, within some of the founders and businesses that you're working with.
Yeah. I think to that, I would say culture to some degree is organic and it will feed off of the motivation of the founder. And I feel very strongly that when I meet a founder, I need to understand that there's this strong gravitational pull to why they're choosing to build this. And would they build this without the money? Would they build this with no one looking? Like, do they feel such an innate sense of urgency around the problem that they're trying to solve? Is it a lived problem? Is it something that they couldn't stop thinking about, that they ultimately were like, all right, we got to do something about it? Because I think when you have that quality in a founder, everything else is sequential. That's going to come. That's going to bleed into the culture, because I think one of the things I learned from the RAF too is that you lead by example, not by authority. Like, I was one of the only females in that entire flight of cadets, and no amount of authority would tell a 15-year-old boy what to do, right? Like, you lead by example, you lead by exhibiting the culture that you want to have. And I think when you have a founder that is so obsessed with a problem and they will make it inevitable, that kind of energy bleeds into your employees, your early employees especially. And I think the challenge becomes, right, like, as you scale, how do you have that sense of urgency kind of throughout the ranks? And how do you instill that message when you're like a 100-person company versus a 20-person company? And that, I think what's really crucial is kind of the leadership folks that you hire have to feel that way, because all it takes is for one person to be indifferent, and that spreads like wildfire in an organization. Your leadership team has to be so equally obsessed with what you're doing. And I mean, that might be unrealistic, right? Like, maybe you can't find that. It's a competitive hiring market, but in an ideal world, that's probably what I'd like.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that that middle management of the team, they are the nucleus, they are the center of the business, and so everything kind of permeates from there, and that's where a lot of stuff will break. And to your point, 100%, like, there's folks that aren't going to be obsessed, but the only people that are going to be able to know that, it's not going to be the CEO, it's going to be the person right in the middle that's like, we made a wrong hire here, or this one isn't the right one. Right. So I think it's a really good call out. One of the last kind of topics that I really want to touch on here is your thoughts around like this outsider investment thesis, where really the people on the margins make the middle. And even me personally, I obsess a little bit more over problem market fit than founder market fit, because like, I'd much rather find an incredible founder that's obsessed about solving a problem, even if that problem wasn't because they worked at JP Morgan Chase for 50 years and led the lending arm of the business. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you specifically think about this kind of outsider perspective.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think, at Montage, kind of company-wide too, it's one of our core beliefs that true disruption rarely comes from inside. And I think the reason is that insiders kind of have this cognitive debt, right? Like, they have an understanding of how things should be. I think there's an element of having perhaps reputational skin in the game because they're incentivized to defend this worldview that they've had. Outsiders have none of that. They see the blind spots that insiders can't. They don't inherit any of those assumptions. They're not even trying to play by the rules because they don't know what the rules are. They're completely reinventing the game. And to be honest, that's what you need to build a generational company, because you need to come at it, especially with some of these larger markets that we're investing in, like healthcare, right? Like, I think that the times that we've spoken to an insider, it's just wanting to navigate the same bureaucratic mess, wanting to play by it's like, no, I don't want to invest in that company that's going to take 30 years to get to some form of meaningful revenue. I want to invest in the founder that's going to flip that on its head. And I think the one thing they have in common is that they approach these problems as first principles thinkers, because they literally have no other choice. And the other thing about outsiders is there's a higher sense of urgency, right? If you're an insider, maybe as a founder, you're like, all right, well, I have the reputation, I'm at the incumbent, I'm the easily backable person. Maybe you're just doing it to be a founder. I'm not saying that's what everyone's doing, but it feels like a natural progression. Like, I feel like the outsiders coming in, they've been personally living in some form of problem, like it's impacted them, and they've made it their mission in life to solve this problem because they're so deeply disturbed by it. And I think that's the value that you get. And I do think venture as a whole right now has a pattern matching problem. I mean, we've trained ourselves to spot the right schools, the right logos, like the polished deck. And I think what that's costing us is mistaking familiarity for quality, right? Like, and I think that's how you're going to miss the generational founders, because I think pattern recognition, it's useful for risk mitigation and, necessary to understand what those boxes might be, what those phenotypes are. But I mean, it's terrible for discovering the non-obvious upside.
I think that is so well said, and I couldn't agree more. There are a lot of very easily backable people that are living in the parameters of a rule set that they believe their career has forced them to follow. And so these kind of rule breakers, as my friend at Antler Ventures would say, these maniacs, these folks that are they're not even breaking rules sometimes because they don't even know the rules exist, which I think is just like a very refreshing place to be. And again, like, we can look at history as much as we want, but it truly is the people on the margins make the middle, and that middle are the ones that are creating generational businesses.
I love that.
This is awesome. And so I want to close this up with a couple of speed round questions, if you're good with it.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. What is one AI hack that has been a huge unlock for you as a VC?
Granola, shout out to that app. That is like the most amazing note taker that I've ever seen. I just feel like I'm 10x more efficient. Like, my quality of life is just so much happier. Love that team.
It is so good. I use Granola religiously. If you had to invest in one vertical for the rest of your VC career, what vertical would it be? Feel free to throw a trend out there as well if you don't want to just say a vertical.
Yeah. Healthcare. I think it's going to be the single most transformative sector for the world and for the human race. And we're seeing so much on the longevity side from both a quality of life and a therapeutic side, so much from like a cognitive side, which will then enable everything else that we love to back in venture. I'm just so passionate about the healthcare space.
Cool. With that, what is one wellness hack or thing that you do that helps you be a better you?
Oh my God, I'm the biggest like wellness junkie you will probably ever meet. I am obsessed with red light therapy. I have the brand Platinum LED. I do it every day. I think that's probably the reason I don't have Botox yet, when I probably should. Red light is like the single best beauty hack anyone can do for themselves.
Can you actually feel the difference? You can see and feel the difference?
Yeah, in terms of my energy, for sure. Like, I've been very consistent with it, probably for over 2 years now. And I feel like I have more energy, I have more mental clarity. Also, like, post-workouts, it's great for muscle inflammation and soreness, great for sleep. It's just like the all-around best wellness hack ever. Platinum LED is the brand. Very, very good.
All right. I'm going to check it out. Send me your affiliate link. I might use it.
I know, I should be like this wellness influencer on the side.
Okay, final question. If for all the aspiring founders out there currently working as an operator in some company but wanting to start a company, what advice do you have for them?
Don't start a company unless you're obsessed with solving that problem, and don't start a company just to start a company.
Amen. That's great. Nia, thank you so much for joining. Again, excited to see you out at the events, over coffee, talking about trends, co-investing together, all the things, but really appreciate you joining. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun. I really appreciate it.
This season is supported by Silicon Valley Bank. For decades, Silicon Valley Bank has been a true partner to the innovation economy, helping both founders and funders grow. Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank, member FDIC. Please note, this podcast is for informational purposes and not investment, financial, or legal advice. The views expressed are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the position of Silicon Valley Bank.